The Central Bank of Nigeria has directed all banks and other financial institutions to transfer all dormant accounts, unclaimed balances and other financial assets to its dedicated account. A circular released and signed by its acting director of the Financial Policy and Banking Regulation Department, John Onojah, said all dormant accounts and unclaimed balances with banks for at least 10 years will be warehoused in a dedicated account known as the Unclaimed Balances Trust Fund Pool Account. The Apex Bank added that the funds from dormant accounts and unclaimed balances may be invested in Nigerian Treasury Bills and other government securities. This morning, Nabila Mohammed, Research Analyst at Chapel Hill Denham Securities, joins me to talk about this. Thank you so much, Nabila, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Yes, good morning to you. So first, when this particular story filtered in, a few Nigerians said or reacted by saying that, hey, these unclaimed balances in these so-called dormant accounts does not belong to the Central Bank of Nigeria. So what do they want to do with it? So kindly help us understand what are the key objectives of the CBN's new guidelines on the management of dormant accounts, unclaimed balances and other financial assets held by these banks and other financial institutions, knowing fully well that is backed by the Section 72, subsection 11 of the BOFIA 2022 Act.
So, as you rightly said, this move by the Central Bank of Nigeria is backed by law. I just want to put that out there, that they are not going contrary to what the law provides or what the law states. And if we want to dissect this particular circular, we should understand that the banks or other financial institutions are in the business of taking deposits which they intend to keep for the depositors for as long as that depositor wants to keep that particular financial assets with them. Now, it's also the prerogative of the responsibility of these banks to make sure that these accounts do not become dormant or inactive. In other words, they would have to make sure they constantly keep in touch with the customers. Now, this particular guideline just stipulates that if peradventure there are accounts or unclaimed balances or assets held by these banks that have been inactive or dormant for over 10 years, that's for 10 years and beyond, these funds should be moved to CBN. The next burning question that people would want to ask and understand why is, what will CBN do with these funds? The circular clearly states that these funds will be invested in Treasury Bills and other government securities, and whatever interest is earned on those securities or those instruments will definitely be credited to depositors when they come up to claim that these funds actually belong to them. The guideline also further states that the banks should be able to publish the list of dormant accounts that they have on an annual basis. So meaning that if peradventure there are accounts that maybe the depositors are not even aware of that they currently have or they hold for maybe family members or as the case may be, they will be able to see that when it is published or disclosed by these banks. All I see here is that the banks will now be more intentional, more deliberate about making sure that accounts do not become inactive beyond at least 12 months, become dormant beyond 12 months, given that they have 6 to 12 months to be as the definition for an inactive account.
So how does this also align with the broader goals of protecting consumers, ensuring financial stability, and promoting transparency in the banking sector? Seems to be one of the narratives that the Apex Bank pushed while giving out these guidelines.
So in terms of transparency, I mean, just speaking to the fact that the banks are expected to keep constant contact with their customers and ensure that the accounts do not become inactive for as long as 6 months. It also stipulates that the list of or whatever number of dormant accounts that they have should be disclosed and published on in 2 or more national dailies, at least 2 national dailies on an annual basis. That is transparency for itself, because it then gives the public an idea of, okay, this account is dormant, this account is dormant, this person that is holding this account, I can also step forward and claim ownership of my account, given that it has become dormant. And, you know, that just really speaks to transparency on that front. Also, the plans that they have for the funds when it is passed into the Unclaimed Balances Trust Fund Pool account and how it will be managed by a committee that will be saddled with the responsibility of managing those funds and ensuring the returns that are earned on those funds are passed to the balances, is just speaking to how and where they intend to pass these funds to at the end of the day. So there is clarity indeed around what they intend to use the funds for and how they intend to manage it going forward.
So are there any drawbacks of transferring these funds to the UBTF pool accounts? Because a few people are actually concerned how the Apex Bank will be managing this. I will also be ensuring that these funds are being invested in areas or in sectors that would bring about growth and eventually probably trickle into interest being paid into these dormant accounts for those who actually have it but do not know that they have these accounts.
So what I see here from my view is that the CBN intends to reinvest these funds in Treasury bills and other government securities. It's more or less like a cheap source of borrowing to them, a new source of borrowing rather to them, given that they have other means. But these funds are lying idle. Not necessarily idle, but they are not useful right now to the owners of those funds since they have been dormant for 10 years and beyond. So they can as well use these funds and channel it into productive ventures or projects that can, sort of bring about change or development in the country, given that they are investing it in Treasury bills and other government securities. So what I see here is that these funds should or is expected to be deployed to those areas that will bring about further development in the country as a whole.
No, so
whatever interest is earned on it as well would be passed to the balances upon maturity. And when the owners of these funds step forward, they would be able to get not just the principal as well as interest that has been accrued based on the investments that the CBN would have or the committee would have invested those funds in.
Okay, so what about these banks in which these accounts are domiciled? Would there be any sort of profitability coming to them also, or is just basically as it affects the economy, the so-called dormant account holders, and of course the CBN government is actually investing these funds on behalf of the Nigerian government?
So for the banks, what the first impact maybe that it would likely have is on their deposits. But then, as I earlier mentioned, it's expected that banks would not want to have such levels of dormant accounts or inactive accounts. Because if you're just speaking to any banker, they intend to not have any of their accounts go inactive for a period of time. They always send out emails or text messages, just as the guideline has stipulated, to reach out to the owners of these accounts. So it will make them to be more intentional and more deliberate around making sure that accounts do not fall into dormancy for a period of time. However, we do not expect a significant impact. It all depends on the magnitude or the extent to which these banks hold or have dormant accounts in their books. But the expectation is that these banks will strive to make sure that accounts are always active and we reduce the number of dormant accounts that they have going forward.
Okay, so the document also mentions that dormant accounts are susceptible to fraudulent activities while owners might not be adequately compensated. So I would like you to explain the possibility of this and the veracity of this particular claim supposedly practiced by banks.
So really, the regulator is just trying to make sure that all losing knots are tightened, because we don't want any situation where there will be any sort of fraudulent activity. So whatever opportunity that they see can potentially result in a fraudulent act, they try to make sure that they tighten that loose end. And that is just what is playing out here. We've, of course, had cases of fraudulent activities, but then this circular just ensures that that is addressed and that is curtailed, given that the account balances will be moved to the CBN and be managed by a new committee.
Now, the guidelines, according to what we know, rely on financial institutions contacting account holders through their last known addresses. And you also talked about that, of course, as the fact that the CBN would have to mandate banks or put the banks on their toes to continue to have engagements with the account holders. But then some people feel that this may actually prove difficult if people have moved without notifying the banks, or if they are deceased or haven't made arrangements for the heirs to inherit their accounts. This would mean that if information are not actually updated, there might be a challenge. So how feasible is this plan by the CBN to reunite account holders with their accounts?
So they have, let me start by saying this. Every bank has account holders, account managers, agents that they use to reach out to even the most remote areas. That is one. Another thing I would like to highlight is the fact that they have mentioned, according to guidelines, that the list of dormant accounts should be published on National Daily. They should use every possible means of communication to reach these individuals to come and reactivate their accounts, as the case may be. So it might prove difficult, but then given the channels that I have listed, the fact that they have physical account managers, they have agents, they have means of communication, emails, text messages, the fact that they will also be publishing these accounts, the list of these accounts on national dailies, it just proves that they are planning to cover all possible fronts in terms of making sure they reach out to those account holders when necessary.
All right, Nabila Mohammed, Research Analyst, Chapel Hill Denham Securities, thank you so much for talking to us at this time.